Hey everyone. Boy, do I feel better after having this conversation with Varun Soni. We do the intros after we do the interviews. We just start talking when we do the interviews. Varun Soni is the Dean of Religious Life at the University of Southern California. I met him through Jaden Lehman, the guitarist that I met at Roots Rock Revival, that's played on my last two records and played New Year's Eve with me. And it's one of his professors. And he said, you really should talk to this guy. You two would really just completely click. And sure enough, we did. He tells the story. I asked him to tell it, but I'll give you the short version. Basically, he was born in India, but moved here, like, I think he said he was like 6 weeks old or something. So he was kind of caught in between worlds, felt more Indian here in America and felt more American in India, and not really at home in either place. And the Grateful Dead, when he found the Grateful Dead, it was a big turning point for him to he's like, that's when I started to feel like I found my community. This is who I am. This is how I am American or whatever, So what a deep cat. I'm trying to get him and Paul Stamets on together. I told him that, and he sent me a picture of him and Paul Stamets together. I was like, shocker, So I'm going to try to make that happen. But this is my first conversation with him, and he is just the most beautiful man. Just what a beautiful soul. And I love him to death, and you'll really enjoy this one. Thank you so much for coming and being on the podcast.
Well, it's a great honor for me to be here, and I've seen you perform dozens of times in many different states. So to have this conversation with you is deeply meaningful.
Well, thank you so much, man. It's good to finally interact with you somewhat in person.
Right.
To see your face.
People won't know this, but you and I share a special young person in common. The way we met was through Jaden, who's my student, but also your mentee. And I can see how much your mentorship has meant to him in the same way that I'm sure your mentors have meant to you. And when you get to be our age, you begin to see that better. Like, I had these incredible mentors, and now I get to do that. You've done such an incredible job with him, mentoring him. It means so much to him every time. I just saw him last week. Every time I see him, he's just glowing about the next thing that you're doing. So I can't thank you enough for that. But yeah, if you and I had a kid, it would be Jaden, and he's a great kid.
And I want to thank you likewise, because you really connected with him, and from mentoring people and teaching them how much you get from them, and it's definitely a two-way street. So I'm really, really grateful for him, and grateful for him connecting the two of us. It's just, this is how it works, But first of all, I want to ask you, what is the correct way to pronounce your name?
You can call me Varun. It's like maroon, the color, but with a V. Soni is just like the television.
Like the Varun Soni. Okay, that's what I thought. I have an unusual name. Well, someone say unusual, not very recognizable name in America in the 20th century. Right. Trying to be better with my words, right? Be more specific. So just give everybody a quick, if you can, because I want us to I want to go on tangents. I want to go on all the tangents. But just for people that might not know you, tell them how it was that you developed this relationship with the Grateful Dead, like a little bit of background in that.
Great, thank you. Well, listen, I was born in India, but raised in the United States. I was 6 weeks old when I came here. And there was a period between 1924 and 1965 where Asians were basically precluded from immigrating to the United States for the purposes of naturalization. That changed with the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act. So when my parents came, We were like the first Indians in many ways to be in the United States. We had no role models. We had no one to look up to. You know, we had Deepak Chopra and Apu from The Simpsons, and that was it. Today, today, my Indian kids have so many role models to look up to. But for me, it was like total psychological dislocation. When we went to India, everyone's like, "Oh, that's the American," and when we came back to the United States, everyone was like, "Oh, that's the Indian." And I felt like I was neither here nor there. I felt like that sort of hyphen between Indian and American was a barrier between those identities, and I wanted to make it a bridge, but I couldn't really figure out how to do that. And so I just never felt like I fit in, and my whole sort of childhood was this quest for finding a sense of home or a place to belong.
Yeah.
And when I was 16, I saw Jerry Garcia Band at the Wiltern in Los Angeles, and that changed my life because I felt like I finally found a place I belonged. I belonged in the community of other people who didn't belong anywhere else, and we were outsiders everywhere else, but insiders with each other.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of young people too. Of course, the music is at the heart of it, but it was also this idea of going on an adventure to discover America. And as an an Indian kid of immigrants, like the idea of discovering America was a really powerful draw for me. And, between 1990 and 95, I got to see the band, over 50 times. And that was an adventure. We were traveling, we were on full tours, we were going state to state. And what I realized over time is that it kind of began to feel like a spiritual or religious community to me because it was a place of belonging. We had rituals, we had mythologies, the songs were sacred to us. There was a sense that we were part of something bigger than ourselves. There was awe and ecstasy and trance and all the things that I saw in other religious traditions. And so even though the Grateful Dead weren't religious per se, they weren't prophets, they weren't priests, they hated being deified in that way. Even the members of the band talked about the community as being a spiritual community. Mickey Hart said, "We're in the transportation business, not the music business. We're transporting consciousness." Phil Lesh said, "Going to a Dead show is like going to church," right? And so these guys, maybe they didn't choose to be, but they were the leaders of the largest countercultural movement in American history. And that was a spiritual community of belonging. And it was a big tent. I saw it with the Dead and I see it with sports, but we were losing that big tent in
Yeah.
America. The fact that I have fundamental disagreements on deep issues with Ann Coulter and Tucker Carlson, but if I met them, I could talk about the Grateful Dead with them for probably hours without ever getting into our differences. And I feel like we need to be able to talk to people who we disagree with about almost everything else around something that we agree with. And the Grateful Dead gave me a way to do that. And so it may sound silly to say this, like I am now the dean of religious life at USC. That means I oversee more religious groups and chaplains than anyone in the country. Lived in a monastery. I've been to divinity school. I have a PhD in religion. And yet I learned as much about the work of creating community and belonging from my experiences with Deadheads and with the Grateful Dead and with Dead and Company, that as much as I learned in a seminary, in a monastery, and studying the wisdom text. So I see them as two sides of the same coin. And I would not be the chief religious leader of one of the largest private universities in the world if I had never seen Jerry Garcia Band at 16.
Well, you have to experience uh, these things, like you said, the awe, the wonder, something bigger than myself. You can read about all that stuff. You can get a PhD in it. It's like people I know that have gone to church, generations. And I ask, like, have you ever had like a mystical experience, an actual, like paranormal? I don't know. Again, we're with semantics. Like, I don't know what the word is, but have you ever had something that just meant so much and seemed so like impossible? I mean, that's what we're trying to do musically with improvisation. Like when we sync up and this kind of telepathic thing happens, and then something just happens that's wouldn't necessarily happen with just one of us. It's like it's an impossible. Everybody feels it. They all roar, It's
Yeah.
like you have to experience that. If you don't experience it, then you're really not ready to lead all these people as the dean of religious life.
How does it feel for you? I mean, you're on the stage, does it feel like a spiritual community to you? I mean, Dead Has must tell you these stories that sound like stories that people might tell a pastor or, an imam or
I
what have you.
mean, it's I call it a cult in the positive sense or in the descriptive sense of the word. Not, it's gotten such a bad name.
Yeah,
But everything has a culture around it,
that's right.
jujitsu or whatever, and it is a cult,
Yep.
and that's fine. It does, and they made Jerry and Bob and Phil and Mickey and Bill into gods
Yes.
to everyone's detriment, to them individually and to the because after I started studying theology because I didn't grow up in church, I I realized, man, this idolatry thing might be one of the biggest things that they got right. Like, you know, if you want to worship something, worship nature,
Yep.
but not you know,
That's right.
like it didn't do Jerry. It
Oh,
didn't do
it was
him.
terrible for him. He couldn't go
Yeah,
out. It made him
bro.
connected, isolated. It pushed him to a dark place at the end of his life. And so this community he gave so much to, in some ways, it took so much from him. And you hate to see that. And yet, it's hard to deny that there's something deeply spiritual about the whole experience, even if it's not religious, right? It's about the connection, the adventure, the awe, the wonder,
Yeah,
um, being seen, being heard at a time when we all need to be seen and heard. And
yeah, and
so,
that outweighs it to me. That's like it's just like a religion,
you know,
or any of the revealed religions. Even though the Grateful Dead is not nearly hasn't been around as long as the revealed religions. It still has plenty of dirty bathwater.
yes,
But you drain that and
yeah,
you rinse off the baby, you shampoo its hair, and you clean that baby off because that baby's in there,
yeah,
and you don't just nuke the whole tub because
yes,
that beautiful baby in there is still alive and it's still the center that all these roots come out of all the good things,
that's right.
all the good things, and I I wish it didn't cost them so much, but I think like the other side of the coin of idolatry is fame. And I think that may be the greatest temptation and the worst of all
Yeah,
because nobody can prepare you for that.
yeah,
When are you going to get the chance to like really have a serious conversation with Elvis or Michael Jackson or somebody that you don't? So when fame hits you, you're just and all the drugs and
yeah,
the money that's like moves in. So
yeah.
then it just goes, but I hold on to that music. I hold on to that initial philosophy that I think will not die. That's why it will go 300 years because it's correct, and not humans naturally do it. Think of all these people who are mostly rejected their religion, their whatever identity, or wouldn't be allowed into, and then they did this thing. It's a naturally occurring thing for people. We're wired for religion or spirituality or whatever you want to call it.
I think it's a language of meaning making, right? And I believe
I
what
want
the
to get
French
to.
theologian said, Desjardins. He said we're not human beings having a spiritual experience; we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So if we think of that at our core, we are spiritual beings, right? We are meaning making beings, and religion is a language of meaning making, but so there are other languages of meaning making as well, but they
Every
all
language.
every language is
It's
meaning making
art. I mean,
art.
it's like
And
this represents that.
that's right. And so I think, we don't, like you said, we don't want to throw out the spiritual baby with the religious bathwater. There are some things that just aren't serving us well with the tribalism of religious identity, but that doesn't mean we're not spiritual beings who are deeply invested in meaning, purpose, connection, awe, transcendence, etc. I think that's the draw to music or to sports as a spiritual community. When I became the dean of religious life here, everyone's like, "Oh, you're the dean of religious life. You should know the real religion at USC is football." And I was like, "Ha ha!" Until I went to Heritage Hall where we have all the Heisman's, and like the light was shining through, and it was like, "Oh!" And it was like
The hall of idolatry.
that's why it was illuminating the Heisman's. Unfortunately, it was illuminating OJ's Heisman, but still, you get the point. But that's the good and the bad of it all. And then I saw like a pilgrimage to the Colosseum and this multi-generational community telling stories and agony and ecstasy and miracles, I was like, oh yeah, this doesn't just look like religion.
It,
This
it,
does the work of religion, right? It doesn't just look like ritual, pilgrimage, and mythology. It also does the work of meaning making, human connection, joy, transcendence, etc. So, I think you probably see that in wrestling, and many of us see it with
where you still can have a big tent,
Big Ten.
thankfully,
Yep.
for now. But I think I wish we could find some better words, because this is why semantics is always one of my things that I'd like to, because like I say, we're slaughtering each other over semantics.
Yeah.
So I don't want to cut out all the religious people. I want to integrate everything. And so I wish that I could find a better word where I don't go, we want to keep the spiritual part and dump the religious part, because I don't want to dump the religious people.
Yep.
Because their thing is based on that baby in those bathwaters also,
Well, listen, I think fundamentally what people think religion is about what I believe or what I practice, but it's really not. I could say I'm Hindu, and that tells you nothing about what I believe or practice, because there's so many different ways to be Hindu. I could tell you I'm Christian, but there's 40,000 denominations of Christianity, so that tells you nothing. Really, what religion is about, it's about identity. It's about identity in the same way. When I say I'm Hindu to you, all I am telling you is how I think about myself. And all 1 billion Hindus, the only thing that connects them is the fact that they identify as Hindus. And the same thing is true with every religion. And so what happens, I think, because religion is primarily a form of identity, like race and ethnicity and gender identity and sexual orientation and national origin, uh, it becomes tribalized because it's so identity focused. So how do we move from just the religious identity that divides us to a more spiritual identity as human beings that connect us?
Yes.
Religion can be a way to do that, but once it gets super tribalized and it becomes a point of differentiating, or once it becomes a hierarchy of, mine is better than yours, then it becomes part of the problem and not part of the solution. But it can be part of the solution, right? We see this all the time. Religious communities that build hospitals and do social services and universities and schools and
all kinds of good
or,
things.
like, can be part of the solution, and it can also be part of the problem. It's up to us to decide sort of how we use it and how
That's why I'm looking for the new word.
Yeah.
Word. Because, and I want to get back to also something you were saying, that, we kind of agree that, a spiritual being having a physical experience, but in a really materialist paradigm, I'm like, do they even do feelings, or like, how do you deal with law? Is it if ethics is not a material thing that we can quantify, and so don't necessarily exist, is murder wrong? Is any of these things wrong, actually? Like, what are we basing law on in a materialist paradigm, or is it just we are holding on to it from an old time? Because the materialists clearly are not following the law.
That's right.
Right, and begs another question I have: does materialism just lead to the commodification of everything? But how do we bridge that gap in a materialist paradigm that doesn't even necessarily agree that our emotions or our sense of conscience, right and wrong, even exist?
That's right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, the law is different than sort of what a universal ethic might be, right? The law is, for example, killing someone, you could go to jail for life, or in another circumstance, you could get a medal, a congressional medal, right?
Exactly.
On the streets, you go to jail. If you kill someone on the streets of another country, you get an award. If I kill someone as law enforcement, I'll be okay. But if I kill someone and I'm not, I'll go to jail. In self-defense, it could be okay, and not, if I'm the aggressor, it's not okay. And so there are all these contexts where we think about a similar action in very different ways, right? And so it's hard to find some objective truth in the law, because essentially what the law is establishing is that the only actors that can use violence is the state, right? But that's different than a universal ethic, right? That's different than sort of what I would consider to be spiritually healthy. And so the new word or phrase that I'm using now with young people is spiritual health. It's different than spirituality, it's different than religion, but it's somewhat intuitive because I know what mental health is, I know what emotional health is, I know what physical health is, I know what financial health is. And so I kind of get a sense of what spiritual health is, but my sense is all those other forms of health, mental, physical, etc., come from spiritual health, which is about meaning making, human connection, a sense of purpose, not the thing that keeps us up, but the thing that gets us up in the morning, our North Star, right? Being
Yeah.
connected. And my sense is if we are spiritually healthy, we're following a universal ethic even more than a law. Because like MLK
Yeah.
said, following an unjust law, it's not moral to follow an unjust law.
You feel it.
But we all have a voice inside of ourselves telling us something. And I think if we're all attuned to that voice or that compass that points us in a particular direction, that's a way for us to be connected to each other because that voice is telling a lot of us the same things. And that's why a lot of us are frustrated in this current political moment and what's happening around the world because it's at odds with that inner voice that we all share that tells us this isn't right. Even if we have different backgrounds, perspectives, and identities, we have this human voice that is sort of aspirational, not maybe who we are as humans, but who we want to be. And
It's
if we,
just getting to trust that over your identity.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Because I think the fear that comes with being so identified with whatever, you know, whichever one it is, there's that voice competing against the inner voice.
yep.
And that voice has been layered on top of by whatever. Have you ever read this book, In the Name of Identity by Amin Malouf?
Oh, I haven't.
It was a guy, there was a guy, shout out to John Glasser, that we were motorcycle buddies in Birmingham, Alabama, and he trained military intelligence troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm like, oh man, and we're like two of the only guys that ride Triumphs in Alabama. And so I'm like, oh wow, we're not going to be able to have conversations, because it's like our jobs are so opposed to each other. I had the most fascinating geopolitical conversations with this guy.
Mm.
And he recommended this book to me. And it's called In the Name of Identity. And basically, the book is about how does someone strap a bomb onto themselves and then walk into a place full of innocence and kill themselves and everyone. And he says it's in the name of one of 5 identities, if I get it right. One's a racial, religious, linguistic, national, and then I think there's one that is like tribal/ethnic. So if you're Jewish, that's not necessarily a national identity or a racial identity or religious, so it's like in between there. Like Hindu doesn't necessarily say that you're from India.
That's right.
There's Hindus outside, and so he said once these identities, they'll do it in the name of one, something horrible, depending on how strong that identity is, and especially if they reinforce each other. So he was a Lebanese Christian. So his national identity was Lebanese, his linguistic identity was Arabic, his religious identity was Christian. So he got, he was like caught. And I thought, this is why I could have great conversations with this guy, because I could look at this, because I was the same way. I was born Black in Southeast Washington, D.C., but I went to school with really, really rich white kids across town.
Did you
So
go
I'm
to
like, and my dad was not super anti-religious. Bad experience with Catholicism in New York is with my mom. So I'm like in between all these identities, and I'm like, really don't feel like I can trust any of them. I've seen Black people screw each other over. I've seen, I speak English. I don't speak some Nigerian language. I was not raised with a religion. You know what I mean? And I was like, I'm an American. I feel nothing for the flag. Never did. I saw people lynched with the flag wrapped around. So what a gift. It's been hard, but what a gift. And I think that identities might be the real hangup.
Yeah.
As
I get older, I agree more and more. Like my young sort of life was all about identity and what does it mean to be Indian American, and every story I told and everything I wanted to write about. And even when I wanted to travel to India, it was really to figure out what it meant to be Indian American, living in a monastery. What does it mean to be Buddhist? Talking to my grandfather, what does it mean to be Hindu? But what I realized as I got older is it was really the question of what does it mean to be human? I thought it was the question of what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be Indian? But that's not why I went to the monastery. I went to the monastery to think about what it meant to be human. And as long as I am talking about what it means to be human, I can talk to 50,000 students on my campus who represent 140 different countries and every religious tradition ever articulated. The second I start talking about being Indian, being a man, being Hindu, being whatever, American, like I've lost half the people at least. And so I think what music does is it connects us across those identities. You'll find people of
Yes.
all identity markers who wouldn't ever be in the same room together because they have something that they share and love, and they love each other because they love that. Like I will always love any Deadhead I meet, any Clippers fan I meet. I don't care who you are or what your back. I will love you because like we have gone through it together. We've gone on adventures, and with Clippers, we've gone through the trauma. At some point, maybe redemption, but I'm still waiting for that. So, you know, I think that you're providing this kind of human identity, and the great Sufi mystic who wrote the book, The Mysticism of Sound and Music, Hazrat
And Inaya Khan, yeah.
music extols the virtues of the soul even more than religion, and that's why historically the greatest prophets were the greatest musicians. And that's the kind of like prophetic work that great musicians do or great artists do, like Bob Marley or Fela Kuti. They're like speaking truth to power. They're comforting the afflicted and they're
Yes.
afflicting the comforted. It's that's what it means to do prophetic work. You don't have to be a prophet to do prophetic work, right? It's
Yeah.
it's so I do see the work that you've done with Dead and Company, the sort of Grateful Dead universe, as a kind of prophetic work of bringing people together, of comforting the afflicted, speaking truth to power, and of providing a space where people of all backgrounds can feel like they're human. Not that we come together in our humanness, not in our Californianness or our New Yorkness or whatever, when we're at a
Yeah.
dead show or when we're at a sporting event, right?
Although they write all the cities in there
That's
to
right.
make sure everybody gets a cheer.
That's true. But like you can sing, somewhere in San Francisco on a back porch in July in Camden, and people are still going to cheer for that line.
Well, I definitely I want to talk to you about death, and maybe these things don't seem connected to other people, but death and psychedelic experiences. Um, obviously we just lost Bob, and it's very hard. And I've lost some other people like right on the heels of Bob. One of my biggest heroes, Ralph Towner, the guitarist, just died, and it's hard, but it brings us clarity. For some reason we start to see things more clearly when death is a little bit closer in our face, you know? And I wonder if the trauma of these kinds of things are basically kind of equivalent to psychedelic experiences. They're just not, you can't just like you don't have the convenience of like ingesting some exogenous, chemical.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm so sorry, Otil. I know it's been a rough period for you. I've been thinking about a lot of the mentors in your life, like Greg Allman and
Yeah, it's
Bob.
been 10 years of this.
Sophie. I mean, it's been my heart breaks for you.
Thank you.
And it's coming in waves for me too. With Bobby's death, I never knew him, but I felt like I knew him. A lot of us did. We spent a lot of time with him. We got used to having him around.
Yeah.
And so I'm going through that too. I think that there's something there for me. What I've seen is you can change your behavior or you can change who you are fundamentally. And a lot of people change their behavior. But when I see real change in human beings, like fundamental changes, it happens at the soul level. It happens in a near death experience. It happens when people are born again, or it happens in a psychedelic experience. It happens when you have an ego death, essentially. And so where are psychedelic experiences like sort of a near death experience? It's in the ego death of it all.
Yeah.
And the letting go of the projected self. In some ways, our operating system was built for us between the ages of 0 and 5. 80% of our cognitive and emotional development happens then. but how do we update our operating system? This psychedelics can offer us an ego death to allow us to update that operating system across time, but it's not pleasant. Like if you've ever had an ayahuasca experience, it's terrifying. Experience is terrifying. It's not something you run towards. It's something you often run away from, but it's impossible not to be transformed because of it. And so, what I've seen with my students too, especially students who are suffering from substance abuse issues, serious depression, PTSD, etc. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it used to be like, I'm going to outpatient therapy, or, I'm speaking to some other therapist. I'm looking in medications. And now it's like, I'm going to outpatient therapy. I'm speaking to therapists. I'm looking at meds, or maybe I'll go to Peru for an ayahuasca retreat. Like it's
Yeah.
just on the menu for young people. And so my sense is that, we are probably entering a moment where we can think more deeply about the healing powers and sort of revelatory sort of promise, perhaps, of psychedelics. We're at a point where 80 research universities, including mine, are now doing clinical trials with psilocybin research. We're doing psilocybin and mindfulness research here at USC. I sit on Harvard University got a $15 million gift to establish psychedelics, spirituality, and the law program, and I'm an inaugural cohort. So I meet every month with members of the Harvard Law School to talk about psychedelics, spirituality, and the law. I never thought that would happen. And so
Timothy Leary wins.
the zeitgeist is changing. We're maybe at a point where psychedelics are going to be rescheduled, from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, which is insane that psychedelics are in
Didn't
a.
Trump just do that? That's a done
Yeah,
deal, right?
he was going to do it, and now Congress, I think, has to move on it. I think it'll
I
happen,
got you.
but it'll happen, I think. But the fact that psychedelics have been classified with heroin as a substance with no medical benefit, when if you look at indigenous and shamanic traditions throughout space and time, like this was actually and is medicine for so many people.
And
Um,
cannabis, it's the same as heroin.
yeah,
Like,
but I think it's the ego death of it all, right? And it's the closest we're going to get to a near-death experience in our life, unless
yeah,
we actually have one. And people who do have those near-death experiences change. People find God and are reborn. That's why they call it born again. It's like you died, you're born
yes,
again. So how do you get that rebirth experience at the soul level? Not just I'm going to change my
yeah,
behavior over time, micro sort of changes, but like macro transformative change. It happens at a soul level, and there are very few experiences, and especially ones that you can manufacture in the way that you can a psychedelic experience. You can wait your whole life to have a near-death experience. That's not something you really should want.
exactly.
It
You
probably
can't
won't
count
happen,
on it.
right? But you can manufacture a psychedelic experience, and you can
Yeah,
curate it, and you can be intentional about it, and you can be connected to a tradition about it, right? And you can reflect upon it in a way that it's harder to do with the other kinds of soul-changing experiences.
yeah, because mine was not psychedelic. Mine was somebody died. My first marriage was dying, and I just had to confront all this death, and blam, it just happened through trauma, But we're about to have a guy on, Brian Murarescu, who wrote this book called The Immortality Key, where his theory is that there was use of psychedelics in all these religions, including the Christian one, going back. And it all goes back to Eleusis, where they're making something called the kukion, this drink that, now you weren't afraid of death anymore. And the two things they say happen was that you realize we're all connected and you're not afraid of death anymore. It all goes back to the ego death, which is the baptism, what the baptism means, dying and coming back up, so I'm really, I'm super fascinated by all that, because I had it the other way, but I see people being able to have it the psychedelic way. And it doesn't really matter how you get it. You can
No,
get it 10 different ways, none of which are exogenous psychedelics.
that's right. I've
But
had Yeah. I've had very powerful meditative experiences that have transformed me fundamentally, but it was hard. It's harder to get there, or to plan it, or
yeah,
and so you're right. I think it doesn't matter how you get there, but also like what Aldous Huxley said in Heaven and Hell, like it's a doorway to see something, but don't confuse that for the thing in and of itself. This is just a way for us to cleanse the sort of doors of perception, but that doesn't mean that we
yeah,
should like there's a type of spirit, you're talking about materialism, there's a type of spiritual materialism where you're like,
Yes.
oh, I am now enlightened. This is now my new ego is this, right? It's like mixing one thing with another.
It's a new identity.
That's right. But if you look at the history of religion, you could say it all comes from these kinds of experiences. In the
Yeah.
Vedic tradition, soma is probably a psychedelic substance, which that's the oldest religious text that we know of. And if you Terence McKenna talks a lot about how, when we were earlier in our development as humans, low dosage of psychedelics would increase visual acuity, which would help us survive. At a higher dosage, it would increase our sexual sort of appetite, which would help us reproduce. And at the highest dosage, it would actually transform our consciousness, which is how we evolved as human beings. So Terence McKenna would make the argument that actually the development of consciousness is fundamentally tied with the ingestion of psychotropic substances, right? And so I think there's something there. We have to reclaim that in some ways. Maybe
Yeah.
we're getting there, but we have to do it in the right way. It also can't just be like I'm the weekend warrior going on an ayahuasca retreat, in a mansion in Malibu with my Instagram friends. I think it has to be connected also to the tradition itself. It should be respected as something spiritual or sacred. And what I think could happen now that psychedelics are being categorized is we're going to have a new therapy industry. We will probably be training the next generation of therapists in psychedelic therapy, in MDMA therapy or 5-MAPB therapy for marital, counseling. And I think that the fact that we had this terrible sort of period in America with opioid addictions that led to the rise of fentanyl deaths means people have turned off from a lot of the pharmaceutical sort of remedies. There's a great distrust after we went through that. And I think that's opened the door for a more psychotropic intervention.
Well, with all the side effects and
That's
all the addictiveness of it, like ayahuasca is not addictive.
It's anti-addictive.
Mushrooms aren't addictive.
No, they're anti-addictive. Peyote's it's actually a cure for substance abuse. Trust me, no one wants to do ayahuasca multiple times. Like, it's not something that it's not a fun thing to do. It's like 10 years of psychotherapy in one night, it's not fun. So yeah, that's why it's ridiculous that it's Schedule 1, which are addictive drugs, when in fact it's the remedy for many traditions for substance abuse. And Native American church practitioners use peyote for alcohol to treat alcoholism, right? I mean, so yeah.
Well, Paul Stamets, who we both love, he told me, he was like, I have like fundamentalist Christians that I talk to all the time, and they're doing mushrooms and they're doing psychedelics and they're understanding Jesus more and the actual, heart of the thing more. One day, the two of you together I need me on the other side of Paul, or me in between you two.
So funny. I did an event with him at Harvard, and he had the greatest slide of all time, which was a cartoon of a room full of naked people dancing. On the other half, there was a room full of people who were just sitting in a circle and saying, I think we took the placebo. Because like when you're doing psychedelic research, you can't have a placebo. It's like either you're talking to God or you're not,
Hey, bro, this is pretty easy to tell. But yeah, I would love to like, and I think it's happening. What am I saying? It's already happening, because I know they're talking to Stamets and they're listening to these podcasts and finding out, hey, our own religion has a tradition with this.
Yeah.
Like we can go back to ancient Egypt and Samaria and go back to Atlantis and move if you want. I'm sure they've been doing it as long as there have been plants. I mean, come on.
That's right.
We eat stuff, like we find out, we try things. We're scientific even in our, Paleolithicness or whatever. If we try,
my 3-year-old son will spin in circles until he passes out. Like what it means, I think, to have consciousness is to also have the desire to alter that consciousness. It's sort of built right within us, right? There are certain people that will eat psychotropic substances for no other reason except to have that shift of consciousness. And so I think you're right. It's hardwired within us, and everything does that. When we turn on the TV, we're shifting our consciousness. When we are angry, we're shifting our consciousness, And so the question is not, are we altering our consciousness, but how do we want to be doing it in a way that might be spiritually healthy, right?
Yeah. What's the intention behind it? Which is like, it's how the bathwater gets dirtied in the Grateful Dead cult, as I say in the good sense, is that I never did, LSD was how I was introduced as a teenager at 17 years old. And I never did it for entertainment.
Yeah.
I did it because I wasn't raised in church, and I had a sense that there was something, I don't want to call it psychedelic. I guess for me, it was something spiritual on the other side of it. And that's what piqued my curiosity. And I was like, okay, let me see, and then we would just have these really deep discussions. Some people would do, they wanted to see all the colors. I'm not against a heroic dose. That's just not what I did. But I found my own kind of like thing. I was like, oh, it's all about love. And if love can cut through, I didn't realize even back then, like all these identities, but it wasn't like just let's go see the dead and trip too hard, so hard we might end up in a mental hospital. I mean, it's just like that wasn't my aim. But I think it's good. Even I talked to Mike, my old podcast partner, and he was like, well, that's exactly how we did it. But I found through doing that, it did open my consciousness, and I found the deep stuff in Terrence McKenna and all these. So.
Well, listen, there was that famous concert from 2016 at the Gorge where rumor is you might have had a little Owsley beforehand. And I got to say, your playing was sublime. So if that's true, it might have, I don't know if you felt different, if you were channeling something differently or what, but you can tell. If I didn't know about that, I used to have that on CD when I had CD player, I had that concert on CD, and your playing is just, it's I mean, it's always sublime, but
it's
this
a little
like different. You were playing at a different level because that was only a year or two of Dead and Company. And
well, I never, as I said in interviews and stuff, I never liked when I was tripping with my old friends as teenagers, they would always want to play. I was like, I don't want to play. I want to have this spiritual experience, So I didn't. I always tried to get out of it and did most of the time, And then it occurred to me, I was like, wow, this whole band was birthed in the acid test.
Yeah.
So even though you don't personally like to play while you're tripping, it might be a friggin' homework assignment, mister.
That's right.
And so I said that to Bill, and Bill goes, the Gorge is a really beautiful place, man. And he had some stuff.
Of course he did.
I'll tell you a really good one. At the Sphere, your whole field of vision is taken up. So it is by definition a psychedelic experience. And I was like, I don't need to do even micro. Like it is a psychedelic, it's all by itself, So we did 30 nights, I think. I did 15 completely straight. And then the 16th one, I was like, well, just do one little micro. It's almost like a placebo. Like, I'm not sure. I'm going to go, oh, I think I feel it.
Yeah.
So it's just enough to like basically join with everybody. Dude, those jams went. Wow. And I was like, and every night after that, I did. So I did 15 from 16 on. And they were
did you go back and listen to the recordings? Was it actually that, or was that just your experience? Like, I wonder if it was your subjective experience of something different, or could you actually hear it in the music too?
Either way.
Either way, right.
One of my favorite lines in Harry Potter is after Harry and Voldemort basically kill each other at the same time. And Harry is on the other side and all this white, and Dumbledore is there and he's talking to him. And Voldemort's laying like curled up like a little fetus, like a horrible little monster this big. And they have this long conversation. At the end of it, Harry goes to Dumbledore. He goes, is this all just happening in my head?
Mm.
And Dumbledore goes, it's definitely all happening in your head, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Right? And when I talk to people that are like against psychedelics or afraid of psychedelics, which I think you should have a healthy fear of psychedelics, I always say, if you lived in the house you grew up in right now, and then you found out there's 20 more rooms in the house you've never seen, you would never go look in them? come on, you want us
Yeah.
20 more rooms, and you've been here the whole time. That's how your brain is, man. You know, now I've gotten there through drumming for a long time. I've gotten there. I've had all kinds of paranormal experiences since I was a kid. I've dreamed into the future since I was a kid. I'm halfway there all the time. You know, um, I don't need that to know because I've experienced it over and over and over again. But if you don't know and you haven't experienced, I still tried it. You know?
Yeah. Oh, that's right. If you've, Bob Marley said it, who feels it knows it. Like feeling it is a different kind of knowing it. We tend to think of knowing as like, oh, I can articulate it, or I can do a pro and cons list, or I can, teach it.
Prove it.
Knowing it is something beyond words. This is getting back to semantics. It's why you can doubt a creed, but you can't doubt a dance. It's why poetry and music, use words to get us to a place that words alone couldn't get us to. Use words to get beyond the words in some ways. But I do feel that's true. There is a deeper sense of knowing. And when we try to articulate it, sometimes we lose that. That's the semantics of it all. But there are other pure ways of expressing it. And if you feel it, you know it. And so it doesn't matter if other people have felt it or what their experience might be. If it's happening in your head and you're feeling it, then it's happening.
Yeah, if it's new to you and reveals something, I mean, it's like you said, people have these profound changes.
Yeah.
Now, you can argue about, where that happens. I'm in agreement with you that happens at the spirit level.
Yeah.
They even look different.
Yeah.
Like it's but I'm really glad that you've helped me with this so much because it really keeps coming back down to identity and ego death. However you can experience that, hopefully not by actually dying.
That's right.
I mean, that's what it takes for some, right?
But I know people who have medically died and come back to life. And when you talk to them, they're of course going to be very different people. Like you
Yeah.
can't have an experience like that and not fundamentally transform the way you see the world or who you are, especially because so many of those experiences are similar. Like people who have died and come back to life, they talk about a very similar kind of experience of seeing the light, of talking to ancestors, of feeling comforted, of almost zooming out outside of their body. um, Everyone has that experience. You have to think there's something there. um, and the only way I think you can approximate that experience is, like I said, either a near-death experience, a religious, mystical, born-again experience, or a psychedelic experience. All those are happening at the soul level. It's changing the soul as opposed to changing the mind.
Yeah. Because boy, the mind changes itself so
Yeah, it
many
changes
times.
itself.
It takes something drastic. That's what happened to me. It just was so drastic that it changed the mind for sure. And I hope people can get there without that. You know, um, do you play music yourself at all?
I used to play back in the day. I picked up the sitar, and so I was playing the sitar. I was living in India. That was really great. I got to meet some incredible sort of masters, including I spent some time with Allah Raka, who was Mickey
Oh
Hart's,
wow!
tabla
Yeah,
guru, father of Zakir Hussain.
everybody's tabla guru. Yeah,
That's right, everyone's tabla guru.
most.
Crazy. We hang out with Allah Raka, and we're like talking about Mickey Hart, and I'm like, this is all my worlds coming together. Um, so funny how like even the Grateful Dead even brought me closer to India because Mickey Hart always talked about this idea of primordial sound from a Hindu perspective, Nada Brahman, and the 11 is in a Indian rhythmic cycle of 11, and he did all this stuff with Zakir Hussain, and so even at Bobby's funeral, seeing like the Tibetan monks who I used to see with them in the 1990s, the Kyoto monks, and then 108, 108 seconds, which is a very
Yeah.
sacred number for Hindus and Buddhists. It kind of brought me somehow the Grateful Dead brought me closer to India. But over time, I think my love of music went from playing to studying. I had a radio show. I wrote a book about Bob Marley and about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who's a great Sufi singer from
Oh, I love
Pakistan.
music.
So I spent a lot of time trying to document Qawwali music. We worked on a
Wow.
documentary, and so I've spent time around musicians, and now that I'm raising my children, I'm trying to raise them to be musically literate, not necessarily to be great musicians, but to
Yeah.
love music and to play music. But yeah, in my dream life, I would have your job.
Please, after this is over, send me the a link to this documentary about
Okay,
Nusrat,
sure.
man. I
Yeah, I will do.
love him so much. Oh my God, we used to listen to him on the bus incessantly, with the Allman Brothers.
And
Like,
that's what the first experience I had of that was with the dead, because when you go to Pakistan or India, you go to these Qawwali festivals. It's these sort of mystics going from dargah to dargah, Sufi shrine to Sufi shrine. Many of them are ingesting bhang, which is a cannabis-based drink. They're dancing, and in a trance. And the idea is that that's the closest you'll be to God. In my research, I met someone who told me this story, that they were playing at this really intense Sufi celebration at Data Sahib, which is outside Lahore in Pakistan. And the double player was so entranced, like so into it, that as he was playing, he died. And the
Tom
next
Brady.
next to him just came over and started playing. And when you look in the recording, you can't even hear the difference. And then the family afterwards said, "We're so grateful that that's the way he died. That's the ultimate way to die. Like that was the perfect way for him to become one. Like this is
It was already gone.
this was
He
the
just
this was, this, like Bobby said, that death was the reward for a life well lived. It was a type of liberation, right? But to see that relationship between becoming one with the music and then becoming one with the universe, like that, almost like that really thin separation between the two, that was so powerful when the family was telling me how auspicious his death was, not how sad it was.
yeah, they were like, this is the greatest possible thing that could have happened for
Yeah.
him. I mean, to us, uh, that whole thing, the African thing, the drums and the dance and the trance, that is the not to say that there wasn't psychedelics involved also, because all that stuff is naturally occurring, but that's how I always crossed onto the other side. And then we all do it when we go to sleep.
Yes.
Like, don't you ever, it's just only materialists wouldn't take their dreams seriously. Except for me, when they happen later, then I'm like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Like that's. But we have at such a great story him dying at the height of this.
And then just the other dude sliding over quickly and
And
just
like
like,
just when
yeah,
to keep the thing going, because we're
that's
all
right.
now.
That's
That's
right.
the psych. Everybody's still in the psychedelic state from them doing that. I mean, it's just.
That's
Dude,
the
my mentor,
brilliance of the
Colonel
truth.
Bruce, died on stage at the Fox Theater in
That's
Atlanta
right.
on his 70th birthday.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great mentor of yours. I didn't know him, but that's probably the way he would want to have gone out.
Bob was actually jealous of it.
Oh,
And I know because the guy that was his personal assistant told me at the time. He
yeah.
was like, "What? That son of a, that lucky bastard." Yeah,
What
I mean,
compared to what the way we normally think about death. The only truth in our life is that we're born and we're going to die. And yet we have such a hard time reconciling that fundamental truth. We'll do everything we can, especially I'd say in the United States, to distract ourselves from that. I grew up in, I spent a lot of time in India. In India, life and death is all intermingled. It's like
yeah,
it's all there. The cremation is there, the animal, everything is intermingled. Here, I feel like it's like life is here and death is here. Death is like stuff we don't talk about. 90% of our healthcare costs are in the last year of our life to keep us alive in a hospital, as opposed to sort of accepting, I think, the way Bob Weir did, this sort of idea of a liberation, to almost look forward to the one truth in your life, which is that everyone who's born will die.
yeah.
That seems like what it means to be spiritually healthy, is to have that kind of relationship with it. And yet it's really hard for us to do that.
Well, in this time and in this particular paradigm, I think it's almost over because it's so unhealthy. People realize it's unsustainable or it's just not good. The
Yep.
ancient Egyptians had no word for death. It
Yeah.
was called going west,
Yep.
like the sun does, because
Yep.
the sun goes down, but you can't see it, but it's still there, and then it rises in the east again. And they say that's just what we do.
Yep.
We don't
Yep.
die. We just go west, and then we rise again in the east. So I guess they had their belief in reincarnation as the metaphor. I mean,
Yep. Hindus believe something very similar. Just the body is a vehicle. The body dies, but the Bhagavad Gita says it talks about the soul. It says water cannot cut it or wet it, fire cannot burn it, wind cannot chill it, a weapon cannot cut it. Uh, Unborn and eternal, the soul never dies, right? And so the idea of why we meet the people we meet in this life is based on all the other lifetimes we've had and all the work that we've done in the past. And sometimes we struggle to think about, why am I doing this, or why am I, interested in that, or why is this person in my life? When we think about multiple lifetimes, we have potential answers to those questions in a way that we would never have otherwise. And so there's almost something comforting about that, that we'll see our loved ones again, maybe in a different form. Maybe it's in heaven, or maybe it's in the next life when, our mother is now our daughter, right? And so to me,
I think you can go, I know for sure you can go to hell here on earth, because we've made life a living hell for others. Governments do that very well.
Yep.
But I also have been to heaven many times. I'm there when I'm playing, man. When the groove is right, or like I've seen some amazing moments that just undid me, and I was so glad I was there for it. Mm-hmm. Like when we adopted Kabi, she was terrified of men. She couldn't. If I made eye contact with her, she would burst out crying. So we had to get her to eat. So it's all Jess, and Jess held her, and we're at the breakfast table the very next morning. They're like, she's got to eat. You got to get her to take food. And I have a picture. I caught it where Kabi is looking up into Jess's eyes, and she's probing Jess. She's probing her soul, going, can I trust you? Like, I'm at your mercy right now. And the look that Jess is giving her is just, and it was done. And I got it on camera. And if you think I wasn't fully in heaven at that moment, you're crazy, people. Like, these moments of love and kindness, and, those are glimpses, those are experiences to me of heaven. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me, that's what heaven is. It's this love,
That's what we remember. We think we'll remember the big things. We actually remember those moments, the way someone looked at us, the way we felt when something happened, more than like our graduation or this or that. And maybe what your daughter was was seeing was maybe what she was doing was recognizing a soul that she already knew. When my son was born, my daughter is 8 years older, so she's much older. My son was born, and I noticed in the first year of his life, it was when he saw his sister, he was almost like he was saying, "Hey, I'm here. I'm back. Remember me? We're together again." It was like he recognized her. She was like old enough into her own identity where maybe she didn't recognize him. And over time, he stopped doing that too as he got older and he found his work. But in the beginning, when he was a new soul in this world, I swear, like he was trying to tell her, "Hey, we're back together. We got the band back together again. We're on a mission from God. Like we're together." It's like he was there for her. He came for her. He recognized her. They have unfinished business. And now we've grown, as we grow into our own identities, and we have our own language, and all that is a differentiation. Even language is a differentiation, because language splits the world up. It's me and you and the table and the car and the wall and the light, and all these things now have different realities, right? But music doesn't do that, right? And so as he developed language and he became differentiated from his reality, he stopped saying, "Hey," he stopped sort of acting as if he knew her and was trying to get her attention to recognize him. And they're now developing a relationship in this life. But in that moment, I felt like he was reuniting, he was there for her. And maybe that was when your daughter was probing, Jess, maybe what she was actually doing was recognizing her in some
remembering.
Way. And you were like, oh, you were supposed to be in your life. And there's a reason why she's there. This is not random, this is not a coincidence.
Well, it's funny, and we may have to edit this out because Jess doesn't like me to talk too much about the adoption, because Kavi's going to grow up later. But when we were looking at children, we had kind of decided on this other child. And then Jess came to me one day and she was like, no, it's this one. It's this one. And she was just sure. I feel like Kavi, it's what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, because I know with women and their intuition, and with Jess specifically, like when she knows, she knows. It's just, it might as well be a fact. And I treat it that way because I trust her that much. And then now, every passing year with Kavi, I'm like, oh, we were definitely meant to be together. Like, it's just so clear, and her relationship with Nigel from the beginning was like, it was amazing. It was really amazing. So I don't know, you're right. Although I do have a question for you about Buddhism, because Buddhism I have not studied as much. I've gone on kind of a deep theological dive, and I haven't made it all the way into the Quran, and I haven't made it where I would like to be enough in Buddhism. But it's about reincarnation now, because my assumption, which could be totally wrong, is that the Buddha did not believe in like a soul or
Yeah.
something. So I wonder what it is that reincarnates, because it's something that comes that held over from Hinduism, obviously.
That's right. Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Buddha was born as a Hindu prince, and so he was born into this Hindu point of view where we all have these souls. Souls are a reflection of God, Atma and Brahman. They're reincarnated over time. And the goal of Hinduism is to no longer be reborn in the cycle of suffering, samsara, right? It's moksha, it's liberation. So the idea is that as humans, we're all trying to get out of suffering. We all suffer, but none of us want to. And the real way out of suffering is out of rebirth. It's out of, because to be born is to suffer. So, but what the Buddha said is that actually our suffering comes from the idea that we have the soul. The soul is actually the thing that's causing, because this gives us a sense of permanence and ego, and we're the same across space and time. And actually, and that's why for Buddhists, it's not about God. Buddhism is not theistic. It's really about man. We've created our own suffering because we think we exist permanently and independently. And if we change our mindset, we can alleviate our own suffering, right? And so, you're right. The fundamental difference in the sort of philosophical perspective of the Buddha compared to the Hindu environment he was born into was the idea of the soul, that it doesn't exist. It's a projection. There's no soul. There's no God. We're creating our own suffering because we see the world through our ignorance. And if we see the world in a different way, then we can alleviate our suffering. So then what gets reincarnated? This is super interesting because there's no soul, right? So for Buddhists, what gets it's not so much reincarnation as a continuation of consciousness. And so, like, even you were talking about dreaming. What the Tibetan Buddhists do is a thing called dream yoga, where they will, in their dream, try to meditate on the moment between the time you fall asleep and the time you start dreaming. There's this moment where during that time you have the clear light of bliss. And that's the clear light of bliss you will get in your deathbed. So in preparation for death, Tibetan Buddhists meditate in their dreams so that when they die, they can recognize that clear light and understand what it is, the projection of their own mind. That is something that has its own reality. Now, if you do that, then the next sort of where your consciousness goes will be shaped. And so the way I think about it is like the Hindus believe, just say you have a necklace with a string. The Hindus believe that every bead on that necklace is a moment of your life, and the string is the soul that connects it. So the string is always there, connecting every being. The soul is always at sort of existing across every moment of your life. But the Buddhists would believe something more like dominoes. Like you knock one domino down, the next one goes, the next one goes, the next one goes. There's nothing connecting them. There's no string, there's no through line, but there's causality. Conditions the next moment, conditions the next moment. The moment of death conditions the next moment of your consciousness. And this is the Einsteinian idea that energy is neither created nor destroyed. So your energy goes somewhere in the universe. It may find a different form, but the moment of death is what conditions the next moment of consciousness. And so you're right. It's not a soul per se that's being reincarnated, but it is a consciousness that's being transferred in some way or another. Energy has to go somewhere. And there's not a soul that connects every moment of your life, but every moment of your life conditions the next moment of your life.
Yeah,
that's causality. That's karma. That's cause and effect.
Yeah,
that's action, reaction. That's Newtonian. For every action, there is a reaction, right?
Also, so, reaping as you sow.
Yeah, reaping as you sow. So it's an interesting distinction, and it's a really good question. But at the end of the day, really what matters is how you live. It's not what happens after we die. And I think,
Yeah.
for Buddhists, the idea of the soul is less, or not having a soul is less about reincarnation, what is reincarnated, and more about liberating ourselves from a sense of ego that's permanent,
The
or that doesn't change.
separation.
Yeah, or that we have to defend all the time. It's like I have a diamond in my closet. I'm always
Yeah.
defending it. My whole life is defending it. And then I realize I don't have a diamond. Well, that could be depressing, or it could be liberating. Like, great.
Live.
Now I can do it. I don't have to spend all my time and energy defending the thing that doesn't exist. That's what Buddhists think about the self. Like, we spend so much time and energy defending this thing that doesn't even exist. Like, that's just causing us the suffering that we're actually trying to alleviate.
I think that's what I can. It's like, great. Now I can tell my son, there's no diamond. Don't waste your whole life.
That's right. That's
I'm
right.
kind of down with that with the soul ego because, like, I just got back from Egypt, and we were learning from an indigenous wisdom keeper, and I heard someone say preferred not to use the word soul, but more the word spirit, because souls are more individual, and the spirit is all connected. So again, this is a semantic thing, but I like that. He's saying that a soul is more like an individual thing, and it's like, what are these guys, the UFO guys, talk about non-local consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I think God is.
Non-local
The
consciousness.
consciousness of everything, which we can all tap into, which is
Yep.
why I can dream into the future, or probably many other things. But there's not this separation. And that when we have, again, then we're back to like psychedelics and the religions. If you experience this ego death, then you get back to not losing this feeling of separation. Then you have this feeling of at one-ment,
That's right. Yep. That's
I
right.
think I'm down with that. But I don't know, like I guess I'm so comfortable with my definition of God that I feel like I'm more with Buddha on the soul part and not as much the God part. But the God part is certainly so problematic. We probably need a new word.
That's right. We need a that's crazy that we need a new word now for God, because
Isn't God a German word?
maybe, I'm not sure.
Not that should make any difference, but
No, but what you're talking about is also what, like, Jung talked about, this collective unconscious, which he got from Hinduism and Buddhism. And I as I get older, I feel a little more attuned to it. Like, if I think of someone, I know they're going to call me at this point. I just know it. I'm just waiting for the call. Like, sometimes I don't want to think about something because I know it's going to happen. Like, I'm thinking, oh, it's going to rain, my roof's going to leak. I'm like, I shouldn't have thought about it because now I know it's going to happen. I wonder if, here's what I've been thinking about when we're talking about semantics. I wonder if when that happens, that synchronicity happens, if we're tuning into something in the zeitgeist, or if we're creating that reality by thinking it.
As a person that dreams into the future,
Yeah.
I can't agree to linear time being the deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And I call it pre-membering.
Yeah.
Like I pre-membered stuff,
Remembered. Oh, I like that.
So I don't know. Like, for instance, when I was very young, my mom said, "Mom, I smell cigars." My paternal grandfather smoked cigars. I was like, "Mom, I keep smelling cigars. I think Grandpa's coming over." Like, this is like the 70s, so we didn't have cell phones and all the email and all that stuff. He decided to surprise us, and he lived in San Antonio, Texas, and we lived at what might have been Gulfport, Mississippi back then. But we lived in Washington, D.C., and he just came up and surprised us and knocked on the door. And Mom was like, "Wow, you knew Grandpa was coming." I was like, "I just kept smelling cigars." So I don't know if I did that because it was his premeditation, or maybe we co-created it. I don't know. Maybe I dreamed he was coming and then remembered the smell of his cigars in our house in the dream. I don't know. Like, all I know is this is not stuff ain't what it seems to be. But I'm down with all of it. Maybe it's both end. I don't know. I love that idea though. I'm going to explore that. Deepak he's heavy, man.
Yeah. I think it's certainly true for our self-talk. Like if we're telling
Yes.
ourselves a story that is one of hope and possibility and joy, then I think our life will be reflecting hope, possibility, joy. If we're telling ourselves the story of our life as being impossible, nothing but suffering, and what's the point? Then that's the reality we're going to live in. So I think in terms of our own self-talk, it's true that the story we tell about ourselves creates the reality that we live, and where we have agency is actually in changing the story or the narrative. Like we always at a university talk about nature versus nurture. Are you the product of your genes, or are you the product of the way you were raised? Yet we don't choose who we were born to. We don't choose nature. We don't choose how we were raised. We don't choose nurture, but we choose narrative, right? We choose the
Yeah.
stories that we tell about ourselves. That's where we have agency.
If we're bold sometimes, because we're given a lot of narratives,
We
man,
are.
that are
We are.
false, and
We
we're
are.
also a big part of the narrative is to not buck the narrative.
But you're right. And that's true. I think what I try to do with young people is let them know that they are telling themselves that story, whether they like it or not, whether they're conscious of it or not. So
Conscious of it.
if you're going to tell the story, why not own it? Why not be proactive? Why not be the driver and not the passenger in your own life? And so it's sort of giving young people this idea that they actually have a choice they've inherited some stories, some narratives, some cultural values, but part of learning is unlearning. It's unlearning the things that don't serve you well, right? And when you go deep into the question of who am I, and you start to tell a story about who you actually are and live that story, then you have choices about who you want to be. But when you're just the recipient of what you think the story is coming at you, is life coming at you or is life coming from you, right? That's a choice I
Yeah.
think we can make for ourselves, but we have to be conscious about it. We have to be
We,
proactive about it.
we got to be super conscious and super proactive and and tenacious about. I mean, we have to be so. It's like I'm going to come up with better words, but for this paradigm, it's an act of war. People say, how are you always so happy on stage? I'm like, it's my intention. Literally, it's an act of war. There's so much trying to influence me to not
Yeah.
to go against this, and I'm just like,
Yeah. You
but
got, you
with a smile, with
and the war
joy
paint.
and
You
open
got the
heart.
war paint too.
Uh,
You
and
got the
what?
war paints
Well, I
too.
tell them it's peach
And
paint. They
actually,
were like, "Oh,
yeah,
who's got the war paint?" In a sense, they're right as far as this paradigm is concerned. But it's just a rejection. You know, that's why I got in the band. I was like, I understand finally when Jerry said, "We're all so different in the dead. The one thing we have in common is we're all pathologically anti-authoritarian." And with that, there's some other facets on that diamond. Is that we're always asking why. That's the one thing I inherited from my parents. I'm so glad they both have. Well, why? You got to study history or whatever, but I want to know why. Science can't really teach me why. Science can teach me how, which I'm fascinated by. But I want to know why. And so that questioning, just being allowed to question, or even my dad saying, if you're not questioning, you're an idiot, bro. You know,
that's
like you're
right.
my son. Don't, you know,
I
he said, if your friends go jump off a bridge, you gonna go jump off a bridge? You just
yeah,
gonna follow the pack?
yeah. Well, when you're younger, you want to fit in, and when you're older, you want to
Yeah,
stand out, right? So it is different. But we teach our kids to get the right answers. We never teach our kids to ask the right questions. The
yeah,
questions are more important than the answers, especially the big questions of who am I, what does my life mean, what matters to me, why does it matter to me, how do I find joy, who do I love, how do I love? The answers change. The answer to who am I changes at 5 and 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 and 50. Like the answer changes. The question doesn't. So if we're looking for some kind of anchor, it's in the questions. And I think
yeah,
religion is about the answers, but spirituality is about the questions.
yeah.
The reason we're all spiritual beings is because all of us have asked the question, who am I, in some way or another, consciously or subconsciously. Every human who's ever lived has asked that question. AI doesn't ask that question. Animals don't ask that question. What makes us human is asking that question, not necessarily answering it, but asking it. And so just being comfortable with the questions, interrogating the questions, wrestling with the questions, I think that is what it means to be spiritual or to have a spiritual life. And the fact that you were raised to question that's how I'm trying to raise my kids. Like, what are the right questions, not what are the right answers?
It's so true, man. Colonel Bruce used to tell me that all the time, man. And I'm really glad I was raised. My dad was so anti-religious, but my mom was spiritual because when my experience happened, I was able to be objective about it. I didn't have any guilt, any fears, any knee jerk, anything. I could just interrogate this thing completely objectively. But what they told me to do, I heard some voices when I reached out in a moment of despair. And these three voices answered me. And I was too desperate to question, am I crazy or whatever? And they told me, you should go back and read the Bible, because I had been studying a lot from my dad's perspective, trying to find the root, to all the ancient Egyptian stuff that came up through, but then was all misinterpreted, right? And they said, you should go back and start at the beginning and read it, but erase the chalkboard, open your mind, use your full mind and open your heart and look for truth and see if you find truth in it. And then I was lucky enough to have this guy, Dr. Jim Barnett, who was a theologian, that I could ask him questions about, and he never gave me a bullshit answer. He would be like, why don't you check this book out and then tell me what you think? And then I'd have 20 more. And we would just talk. But it was always about the questions. And he would say, better to have a question you can't answer than an answer you can't question.
Oh, I'm gonna steal that. I'm gonna steal that.
That's out there, but in fact, he may not have said it exactly in those words, but that is the philosophy that he lived by. And he was a Southern Baptist pastor, whose father stood up with Martin Luther King in the 60s and then was a rock star of the Southern Baptist Convention. And then they started getting bomb threats and death threats from the Klan and all this stuff. So he had to walk out what Jesus taught. They put their lives on the line, man. And it's crazy, man. So I got to realize, oh yeah, it's just about the questioning. And then you see, as I started to get deep into it, see the threads that connect all the spiritual traditions, because they're all dealing with these same questions. And I want to hear all the answers. I want to try the whole buffet, man. It's all chicken, but I want every recipe. Just so right. I know, I want to experience it so that I can decide for myself,
Yep. And one of the things I think, going back to our earlier point, that all religions are saying fundamentally is we are not who we think we are, right? We are not who we think we are. But this would say you think you're human, but you're actually a Buddha. Hinduism says you think you're human, but you're actually divine. Judaism says you think you're alone, but you're actually part of a tribe. Islam says you think you're unequal, but you're actually radically equal in the face of God. Right? Christianity says you think you're human, but you're a child of God. So all of these traditions are encouraging us to go on this journey of self-discovery, which fundamentally is about the questions. And those questions are, like I said, not only the things that connect us with other people, but they instill within us a certain sense of humility. I think they move us away from a tribal identity. If I'm asking questions, that means I don't have all the answers. That means my identity can't be that based on I am right and you are wrong. It has to be more like my path is as good for me as your path is as good for you. And that's how we see each other in each other. That's how we see ourselves in each other. Is by having the questions. The answers are dividing us, but the questions can unite us, right? And allow us a kind of empathy that we really need right now.
That's what I'm hoping, man. I have a lot of the ancient Egyptian thing is so it's so beautiful. It was matriarchal, and the patriarchy misinterpreted it. Even in Egypt, when Egypt shifted to patriarchy, by the time they taught it all to the Greeks, And so now we still think of these, what they call the netters, as gods and goddesses, but they're not. To the ancient Egyptians, they were more like forces of nature. So the cat can see in the dark, and this is, they're representations of forces of nature. So they weren't like in the ancient times, worshiping the netters. The netters are forces of nature, and we as humans are expressions of the forces of nature and have access to all the forces of nature, which people like Jesus said explicitly, you can do all that you've seen me do and more if you believe, so all that what we would consider superhuman power. They're just nature powers that we can tap into. And so it's changed the way I think about praying, you know, like, because I ask for things. But now I'm like, okay, let me ask the forces of nature. Hey, man, help me feel, help me get to here, help me, connect to you, whatever, however this works. It's like totally reoriented the way I think about things. So I'm like, as we talk about semantics and trying to find the words for what it is, this is what's shaping my recent thinking,
And maybe the way we get through the semantic challenges, instead of finding new words, is just redefining or expanding the definitions of the words we have, so that
that's
an act of prayer could also be like, when you play music, that could also be considered an act of prayer. I spent some time with Steph Curry. We did a documentary project together. I love Steph. Steph's the greatest shooter ever. When he's working on his shot, it is science. He's like in a lab. He's like looking at the arc, the trajectory, the speed, the release, the everything. But when he shoots it in the game, he said it's an act of prayer. He's not thinking about any of that. It's an act of devotion. There's a purity to it. There's no shooter. There's only shooting. It's like maybe you felt like when you hit that, when you're deep in the pocket, your ego may dissolve. Maybe there's no player. There's only playing. There's no musician. There's only music, right?
That's it, bro. You'll actually be standing to the side of yourself.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It feels like I'm there and my hands are like this.
Yeah. Wow. That's deep. Really.
No, and it's a beautiful thing, because I think that is, one of the people I love is Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Yeah, I love Heschel.
He wrote that book, God in Search of Man, and a couple other ones I learned. But he, where definitely when I'm playing music, it's an act of prayer. But when I'm cooking breakfast for my kids, when I'm folding clothes, when everything, he said when he marched with Martin Luther King, he said, our feet walking, that was my prayer.
Right. Pray with your feet.
Yeah. Your whole life is a prayer of thanksgiving, and I love, he talked about the same thing. He said, our problem is not for lack of knowledge. We got enough knowledge to kill ourselves 100 times over. We are going down because of a lack of wonder.
I love that. I think a lot about the crises that our young people, that our kids are going to face. And I think there's 5. There's 4 that everyone is working on and everyone knows about. There's the crisis of health. There's the crisis of sustainability. There's the crisis of war. And there's the crisis of justice. But the 5th crisis is the crisis we all have to be a part of. We all have to solve. If we can't solve the 5th, we can't solve the other 4. That is the crisis of joy, right? I see it all. We have a crisis of joy. And how do we become the solution to the crisis of joy? How can we all be part of the solution to the crisis of joy? I think it's to do the things that you've been doing, that I've been trying to do. It's bringing people together. It's trying to empower people to see the best version of themselves. It's bringing people together over common goals. It's creating opportunities to be seen and heard. My teacher, I'm really lucky. I got to meet and study with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He's my guru. I named him. And my wife grew up in South Africa, and her guru, the person she got to grow up around, because he lived in the same part of town where she went to medical school, was Desmond Tutu. So
they did that book together.
Lama. And when they wrote their book together, these are people who've seen unspeakable amount of suffering.
I read that book,
and it's called the Book of Joy. It's not called the Book of Suffering.
Yeah.
Book of joy. Even in the sort of the darkest of moments, that's what we need, is joy. And I think that's the prayer, right? Is to sort of help create joy. What the Dalai Lama says in the book is that joy is the reward we get for bringing joy to others. So many of our problems could be solved if we all had this idea of what the Dalai Lama said: my religion is kindness, and joy is the reward we give for bringing joy to others. That's it.
That's it, baby. That's Heschel has said. Yep. Loving kindness. He distilled it all down.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, man. You could paint Hillel. I love the story of Hillel when the guy comes to him. This is where Jesus got this from, because he was the head of the temple.
Yeah.
And the guy comes up, just like they used to do to DJ,
Yeah.
do me a miracle, and he says,
Yeah.
can you tell the whole meaning of the Torah while standing on one foot?
That's
And
right.
Zillow goes, yes, he lifts his foot up. He goes, that which is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. And he puts his foot down. And I was just like,
Yep.
bingo, man. It's really simple. It's really
Right.
simple.
And he didn't even say, do unto others what you want to do, you want others to
Yeah,
do.
he did the negative.
Do unto others what you don't want. So that's even a lower bar, but yet can we even get there? Can we even get to that point, of not, being the asshole, right? As opposed to being
But,
the person,
but it's such a great clarifier. That which is hateful to you, do not do this. You don't want that. Like, it's just so big. And that is, you can't tell me we can't find that in
Yep.
every village, in every county, in every state, in every nation of the world.
Yep.
We can find that.
That's right.
And so that's been my job. One of the first questions I was going to ask you, and I didn't do it, was how do you see how would you describe yourself, or what your main vocation is in life? And mine is, I know what it is now, but for me it is like to spread that joy. When people go, how are you always smiling? Because it's an act of, because this is what I came here to do, to turn up the joy. That's all I know how to do in the face of this craziness.
It's the ultimate act of resistance against a world. It's an act of defiance against a world that wants us to be outraged, anxious, burnt out, disconnected, cynical, right? This is actually an act of defiance.
I feel like yours, you would tell me, is to connect people.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's sort of, I grew up without a sense of belonging. Like I said, the Grateful Dead gave me that, and I want to give that to others. I really spend a lot of my time trying to help young people find their way home, or their sense of belonging, or their tribe, or their truth, right? And I had great mentors who did that for me, and so I get to do that for others. It's really great, quite an honor to be able to do that, but it's deeply meaningful because it's deeply personal. And I'm just lucky that I was able to find a way to translate something that was so personal to me into something that was professional as a career.
Yeah, that is the greatest thing, man. If you can do that as your work too,
That's hard. I can imagine maybe for you, like, music is your passion, but it's also your livelihood. And so that can be difficult sometimes, a different kind of relationship. My friends who play music as in a cover band, but go to their other jobs, almost have a purer relationship with it than my friends who play music for money and have to do things that they don't really necessarily love.
It's so gross, and the more money you make, the more gross it gets. Yeah. But it took the pandemic to bring me back to when I was a teenager, and I started working on something that I had been avoiding working on my entire career. But then even more recently, it took all this craziness to really bring me back to my true reason, and deaths also. Like, I'm making the playlist for my celebration of life. I just want when I die, for everybody to have a party. I don't want speeches and all that stuff, Not that I would warrant that, but I have a playlist that I want to be played, And making this playlist has made me go back over all the music that I used to listen to that gave me the inspiration and the bravery to try to become a musician when I didn't know anyone personally that made their living solely off of playing music. I had no idea how to do it. And listening to that music again just brought me back to the joy. I was like, no wonder. And listening to this Ralph Towner, no wonder. I was so inspired, man. And so I'm glad I haven't lost it, after all this crap. Because it just, I was like, I have 19 years left until I'm 80. And man, I mean to tell you, I mean to turn up the joy, like, to beyond where I've ever had it.
Yep.
Which is, hopefully, a high bar.
That's beautiful. Well, it's amazing as you think about your death to think about the music that gave you life, right? And the kind of that symbolizes. And I think, when you have kids, you have a different skin in the game kind of for the future, and the days become longer, but the years become shorter. Like it really goes by quickly. And I'm feeling the urgency of that also. And I'm with you. Like at this point, I don't feel like I have to prove anything to anyone other than myself. And what I really want to do, like what my true north is right now, is just do the things I love with the people I love. Like that's what success is to me right now. That's what it means to be spiritually healthy. Everything else is the noise. That's the signal. I wouldn't have felt that way in my 30s or 40s. I was much more, career oriented, and I have to prove this and I have to do that and I have to. And now, like, it's just there's a lot of noise, and I'm trying to focus on what's real. And that's real, and that's what I don't regret. That's why I never will regret spending time with the people I love, doing the things I love. The reason I love the Grateful Dead so much is because it allowed me to spend time with the people I love doing the things I love, right? And just
Yeah.
like the Grateful Dead made me feel American. The Dead and Company made my wife, who grew up under apartheid in South Africa, feel American because she went on that adventure too. And I was able to share that with her. Your great gift to so many of us was giving us this glorious 10 years where we could reconnect with what was sacred to us, with the people who mattered to us, with the adventures that animated our lives, with the rituals that shaped our beings. We didn't think we'd have that opportunity again. We certainly didn't think we'd be able to share it with people who are much younger than us. And we I don't want to speak on behalf of all deadheads, but I will. Like, we could never thank you enough for that.
Oh man, thank you so much. And I can never thank Bobby and Billy and Mickey and John for choosing me and keeping me along for that ride.
What a ride.
What a ride, man.
What a
Let
ride.
your life proceed by its own design, man. You will never be able to tell. And thank the netters for it, man, because it's just wondrous how it comes out. How old are your kids?
I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son somehow.
So you put a lot of space in there. I guess 7 or 8 and 11 as of Monday. And it really does. It makes you realize like the only thing that matters is making as many great memories with the people you love as you can with the time you have left, because we do not know. People are dropping dead younger than me every day. It freaks me out, man.
We're not too young for anything right now, you and I. We might have been young in our careers when we started, but we're not young in anything anymore.
No, I think it might have been a Terrence McKenna. Can't remember what podcast it was, and I'm going to let you go because I want to be respectful of your time too. But he said something about going to the doctor, and the doctor goes, 100 years ago, you'd have been dead 50
Already.
years ago. Like they died between 36 and 42.
Right.
And I think the point of what they were saying was, your identity will change because how long we live. Like by the time I'm 61. So by the time you're 61, your identity will have changed a number of times, maybe, like how you see yourself. Ego deaths in a way, you know what I mean? Because you're leaving stuff behind and realizing, no, this is what really counts. And we're lucky to live in that time where we probably we'll be lucky enough to shed these identities that separate us so much
I
and
hope so.
just get to human.
The hardest part of my job is student death. We'll lose students every year because we have so many,
Think
and
about
some years are worse than others. And I have parents in my office crying, just wanting more time with their kids. And I feel guilty sometimes going home to my kids when they can't go home to theirs. And so when I think about this, I think a lot about this. And I encountered a book that really was powerful for me, written by a woman named Bronnie Ware, who was a palliative care nurse for 15 years. And she spent 15 years on the deathbeds of her patients who were the most honest and vulnerable, that
Yeah.
total clarity over their life. And she realized they had the same 5 regrets. She wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And now my version of what it means to be a successful life, have a successful life, is to get to the end of my life without those regrets.
Yeah.
Regrets are, I wish I had lived the life I wanted, not the life other people wanted for me. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd spent more time with family and friends. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Like, no one knows you're in the office Friday night. No one remembers that you were in the office on Friday night except for your kids. And the last one is, I wish I had allowed myself to be happier. That at the end of our life, we didn't give ourselves permission by controlling what we could control to be happy. And so that's what I'm trying to do, get to the end of my life without those regrets. And what we're left with ultimately at the end are the memories that we've made. So every day is a way for us to make a memory that we will sustain us there. But I also am on a campus with the only gerontology school in the country. And what the gerontologists tell us here is that it is true in terms of longevity that 60 is the new 50. It is true that 70 is the new 60, and it is true that 80 is the new 70, but 82 is 82. When you,
See, I'm right.
Mickey Hart's probably the exception of the rule, but like when you hit 82, you're 82. And so I'm like trying to figure out how to do all this before 82, and a certain amount of urgency to that.
There is. I told you, it started with my wife. My wife says, we only have 7 more summers with Nigel. Talking about how fast it goes. The days are long, but the years are short. I was just like, it was like she just, I was like, whoa.
Yes.
So we've already been talking about this. It's all about making memories. It's all about making memories. Well, then I thought, well, how many years do I have till I'm 80? Only 19. Well, Nigel's 10. 10 went like that. In 4 years, he's going to be driving our car. So the next 10 is going to go like, I have 2 more of these and I'm 80.
Yeah.
So I am, man, more time. I never had a problem with not working too hard. I had to be inspired to practice a lot because I hate practicing. I'd play all the time if I was inspired, but allowing ourselves to be happy.
Ooh. Ourselves permission. That it's not a state that we come to, but a choice that we make for ourselves.
Again, why are you always so joyful when you play, Oteil? How do you do it? I can't do it all the time. I'm not 100%. I'm not. I wish I was, but I cannot fake it. But it is a decision. It's giving myself permission to have the peak amount of joy because we don't know. You get hit by a car like Ethan, you don't know, man. Get to it. Get to it. Man, thank you so much. You're just delightful.
Thank you so much for this. I really needed this, and I'm so grateful to spend time with you. And you know what? There's a great text in the Talmud that says, for every blade of grass, there's an angel over it saying, grow, grow, grow. It's this idea that the universe has our back. And when I think of you, Oteil, I think your angels now standing over you, sitting on your shoulder, asking you to grow. Bobby, Colonel Bruce, Greg, Butch, Kofi, and we all are there too, standing alongside them. And I can't wait to see what you do next. And I can never thank you enough for the joy that you brought in the world.
Oh man, thank you so much. And thank you so much for what you do, man, because these kids need another way in this paradigm, man. We need all the things that you've been saying. And I appreciate it so much. And I hope you come back one time, and I want to have my dream before I hit 80 of you, me, and Paul Stamets together. Live podcast. I'm just going to speak it, and hopefully the speaking will
create that reality. It'll happen now for sure.
Yeah, so we're all in the same room, and no one will believe it, but I'm just going to shut up. I want to see you guys.
I will get on any plane and go anywhere for that. So,
man, you're so beautiful, man. I love you so much. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Forever grateful to you.